All right. Welcome everybody to Win More in 2025. Pursue smarter, bid faster with 4M. As always, I'm your host today, Chris Garafola, head of content at 4M. I'm thrilled to be hosting today's discussion. But before we dive in, I just wanted to extend a special warm welcome to those of you who are new here or just learning about 4M. We're so glad for you to be here joining us today. And if you've been here before, welcome on back. We're excited that you're here again for another thought-provoking conversation. But for all the newcomers here, just a little bit about 4M before we dive in. We're the first utility AI platform that equips civil engineering teams with instant access to reliable utility data and intelligent insights, all in one platform and designed to fit any workflow. Joining me today, as you can see, I'm not the only person on screen here. We have Randell Iwasaki, president of Iwasaki Consulting Services. We also have my friend and colleague, Caltrans Page, senior product director at 4M, and Stroud Evans, VP and Central Division Business Development Officer at HNTB. Unfortunately, was sick today, so he's not going to be joining us, but that's okay. We still have an action-packed webinar for you today. But before we hop into everything, as we always do, a couple of housekeeping items first. Today's webinar will be recorded, so you will get that recording after the webinar. We highly encourage you to share this with any of your colleagues who may not have been able to join us today. And if you think they'll find value in it, we highly encourage you sharing that along with them. Also, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. We'll try our best to get to as many as possible at the end of the webinar. If we can't get to that, though, however, we will follow up with you via email post-webinar, so no worries there. All right, now hopping right into things. For today's agenda, we'll begin by exploring the current state of the industry and the top challenges for project owners and civil engineering teams during pursuits. Our experts will then cover insider tips for winning infrastructure bids from both the owner and commercial perspective. Again, Stroud, unfortunately, is sick today, but we will do our best to take on that spot. Caltrans will also share an inside look at our new utility insights and risk analysis dashboard in action. Really excited for that segment of today's session. We'll finish with Q&A, and we're kind of switching things up here a little bit here. We're going to do a little bit of an after party just in case you guys didn't get enough of us today. So if you can stay on this session for an extra 10 minutes, we're going to be bringing in one of our 4M experts to share with you a live mapping demo so you can get the full range of 4M's features, capabilities, and workflows in action. So again, if you can stick with us throughout this entire webinar, stay for an extra 10 minutes for this after party. And Nisa will be sharing a more in-depth look at 4M. Before we begin, I just wanted to set the stage by discussing some of the macro challenges impacting our industry today, which I'm sure many of you guys are already aware of, but more importantly, why it's critical to move beyond traditional methods to build resilient, future-proof infrastructure in a smarter, faster, and safer way. So project owners and civil engineers today are under immense pressure. Budgets are tight, timelines are compressed, and projects are increasingly complex. So the good news, the demand for infrastructure is at an all-time high, right? As you're all probably familiar with, over $1 trillion in funding from the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. The problem is we have a significant capacity gap in that we lack the skilled labor to plan, design, and build this work. Meanwhile, our reliance on outdated methods like manual utility record research only adds to this bottleneck, causing delays, cost overruns, and additional risk. So to put this in perspective for everyone on the call here, there's 42 million projects that enter construction annually in the US. And on average, each one has to coordinate with 6.3 utility owners, amounting to 265 million utility lines needing identification and validation. However, with traditional methods, on average, only 66% of these lines will not get located on time. So the reality is there aren't enough engineers, field crews, or operators to meet this demand. And at 4M, we believe the solution to these challenges is through digitization, using modern AI-driven workflows to meet today's demand and stay ahead of tomorrow's challenges. And we'll dive deeper into that in a little bit. My colleague Caltrans will, as I mentioned, will share some of the great new capabilities and workflows we got cooking here at 4M. But I'd like to bring in our industry expert here to share some of his insights and perspectives on these challenges and how he sees AI as a key piece in advancing America's infrastructure, starting early on during the pursuit stage. Randy, I'd like to bring you on here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want this to be conversational. All right. So Randy, in your experience as a project owner, what have been the biggest challenges traditionally that you've encountered with creating project bids, specifically regarding utility data? And how have these challenges that I mentioned just a moment ago impacted this process for you?
Well, good morning, everybody. And thanks, Chris, for inviting me to participate in this. I'm sorry Stroud couldn't make it. I was sick earlier this week, but I'm recovering. So hopefully I can share some stories with all of you to learn more about utilities. So the biggest risks in preparing a set of plans and specifications for an owner typically is environmental right away and utilities. And so as you determine what the geometry of whatever the project you're doing, this is the difference between horizontal and vertical. Horizontal construction or highway construction or design, but you go linearly, and so you face whatever's in the way the whole length of the project. Vertical, you have a section that once you come out of the ground, your risk, a lot of your risk is gone.
Mm-hmm.
So we endure that risk the whole length of the project. And so I used to work for Caltrans. I worked for Caltrans for 27 years. Started in the early 80s when I used to call, I remember this, I was in District 6 in Fresno and I was in design. And I used to call Don Regal and Kenny Cartwright, and they would go out to the trailer and pull all the right-of-way information about utilities, and then who owned what were the requirements, who owned the lines, and then who had to move them, what were the requirements by contract. And so that was a very slow process, and that was after you determine your right-of-way needs. And so as you design the project, and then when you went into construction, that's when you started doing a potholing and boring to figure out, is it really there and where is it? And then so it's basically all risk. So you're trying to alleviate risk. And so when I left Caltrans and ran the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, we did all of project delivery for all the projects on the state highway system, interstate in Contra Costa County. And so I signed a directive when I was the director of Caltrans. It said the project sponsor gets to choose who does what phase. And so I hired one guy, Ivan Ramirez, to run construction. And then I had a couple of engineers, Stephanie Hu, Hisham Noemi, and then Tim Hale at the time, Ross Chittenden when I first got hired. And they oversaw the project delivery process up until construction. And so all of these, we decided to digitize the whole project delivery. We're probably one of the first agencies in California for sure to do a digitalization. So we didn't have any paper. We had version control. Everybody's worried about risk. I said, this is less risk. We didn't have 4M or companies like yours to go out and use big data and AI to identify potential risks. But if you think about our process, it used to be design, bid, build. Now we use CMGC or construction manager, general contractor, design build or progressive design build. Those are techniques to alleviate or reduce risk. If you think about it, your risk is in construction, but you try to spend more time in design so you get a better design that reduces the risk. And then when you put it out for bid, you have a joint venture or a partnership with your contractor team. Mm-hmm. So I think for Contra Costa County, for the Transportation Authority, it worked very, very well. And we tried to identify as many potholes or as many utilities as we could during the design phase so that we had less interaction with those during construction, because you can get into right-of-way delay, different site conditions. In our specifications, we always own the risk. So we as an owner, took the different site conditions, and when we found them, we identified them through a risk register, and we identified a cost potentially, and then we built our contingency based on that risk register. And then when the risks manifest themselves, the contingency drops. When it doesn't happen, the contingency stays the same. And lastly, at a local level, when I was the executive director of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, I reported 11-member board made up of 2 county supervisors and 9 local city council members. And I figured that the risk is in construction. So if we saved in construction, we saved money, put it back into our budget to program more projects. And if we overran, they'd get rid of me. And so I lasted a little over a decade running these, widening State Route 4. We widened Interstate 680 southbound for the full length of the county. We did auxiliary lanes on Interstate 680. We did some projects along Interstate 80. I think the last thing I would say in this area about risk is greenfield is a lot better than brownfield or existing facilities. And so you hit more utilities. We hit way more utilities on Interstate 80 than we did on State Route 4 heading out toward east part of the county.
What a great overview. So, Randy, just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned, rather, you have been through one transition where you took the paper to digital, and by going through that process, you were trying to address the risk, which is at construction, but in the design phase, right? Just a question from my side, will it be even possible to address that risk even further before at a concept or early planning phase? Do you see that benefiting the industry and reducing the risk at construction if you do the concept planning right?
Absolutely. Imagine a day when you program a project. Early on in my career at Caltrans, the goal was to get a project programmed. It wasn't to get a project programmed at the right programmed amount. It was to program it, and then we worried about the cost later. And then as you get more sophisticated and the state legislature gets more critical about your blown budgets, then you start having to program those projects for the right amount, and then you're held to that programmed amount. And so now you have software packages that track your delivery process from program all the way through operations. And so anything you can do to get a better programmed amount is better for the owner.
And did you say, Randy, that initially when you went from paper to the digital, people thought it was adding more risk? Like, was that the
It's
perception?
a different way of doing business. Yeah, it's a different way. So your organization has to be ready to digitize the project delivery process. If they're not, it's not going to go over. It's kind of like going off paper spreadsheets to track your projects into project management software. It takes training. It has to follow your workflow. If it doesn't follow your workflow, your staff gets upset and disrupts the project delivery process. And the other piece is very important is time. And so typically you get programmed amount. You get a place in line to deliver that project because you have the resources. So if you look at over time, you look at a resource loaded schedule. If you have blips in that resource, in the schedule and resource needs, or you have valleys where you have too many people on hand, that's not good for your organization. And so you have to hire or lay off. And what we try to do is balance that workload. When I was at Contra Costa, we did almost 95% of the work using consultants. Caltrans, it was a little bit different. It's 90% done by Caltrans employees, 10% by consultants. What you try to do is weather those. Like right now, you've got this huge increase in dollars. Therefore, you got a huge increase in staff needs. Staff needs both on the owner side as well as on the consultant side and the contractors because you got more work to bid on.
I'm curious, Randy, in your experience, how did you manage, like you mentioned potholing and trying to locate where these utilities are, but there's always a constraint with time. Like how did you handle thoroughness with speed or accuracy with speed? Because there's only so much time you have to locate these utilities, right?
I think it's important when you program a project that you're not overly optimistic on the project delivery cycle. And so you have to add some time or float into your schedule to make sure that you position yourself for unforeseen situations. So there was the old saying, you got known knowns, you've got known unknowns, and you've got unknown unknowns. And those unknown unknowns are what worries you. The known unknowns that you should have known, but you don't know, those are the one that when you get in front of your commission or your board and they're asking you and grilling you, why didn't you know this? You know, well, I should have known it because there are known unknowns, but I should have known it. Those are hard situations to be in. And so I think spending more time in the planning process gets you better construction down the road. And so that's kind of the philosophy that we took at Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And our projects typically came in under budget and ahead of schedule. State Route 4 came in a little bit late, but when our contractors told us that we can't pave because it's too windy, it was concrete pavement, so it's too windy, not enough humidity, or it's too hot, and we gave them a weather day. And my board kept saying, why are you giving them a weather day? I said, the option is go ahead and tell them to pave. When that concrete pavement cracks all the way through, we're going to pull that panels up. You're not going to like it when you see a bunch of brand new concrete on the side of the road and the taxpayers drive by. They don't like seeing that either. And then you've got a situation on your hand that you should have been able to mitigate. And so I think through discussions with our board, in my case at Contra Costa Transportation Authority, articulating the value of these changes and then spending time with the team to say, you know, these are going to make you more relevant in the future. If you don't like working for me in the future and you want to work for somebody else, you at least know how to deal with digital infrastructure, digitization of the project delivery process, and you're ready to go. So there's a staff component, there's education on the board where you're commissioned, and then it seems to work. I've been gone 3 years, nobody's complaining about the delivery process to me, about how clunky it is. It's great.
In terms of like known unknowns, in your experience, how many times like utility fit into that category, like known unknowns? You are going into a project, you know there are a bunch of utilities, but that's just unknown. Can you share some experience around that known unknown for utilities?
Yeah, so you know there's utilities there, but you just don't know exactly where they are. We've had jobs in more urbanized areas where the job site looks like a pincushion because you got so many potholes and borings trying to figure out where these utilities are. And there might have been a tree as an example. We had a project where we're going to put a foundation in a certain location for a bridge, and then the contractor goes out and he hits a pipe, and it wasn't there before. It wasn't on the as-built. And what happened is there used to be a tree in the way in 1938 or whenever. And so they moved the utilities around this tree, and then the tree dies and they cut it down. There's no evidence of any tree there, but the pipe's got a curvilinear alignment now. And you run and hit that. And I read somewhere that you don't want change orders. And I don't think that's a right statement. I think you want change orders for the right reason. And those kind of situations is very difficult to predict. You know, the utilities are there for whatever reason. They moved them around something in the past, and they weren't on the plans. And they either did a poor job or they didn't do anything to let you know that they were there. So those situations happen. Those are the known. You know you have utilities, but you just don't know exactly where they are. I think that's a good example of utilities.
Randy, let's talk about trust for a little bit. I'd love to get your perspective on trust. And I know as a project owner, you want to be building trust, so people want to bid and work on these projects. What role does transparent utility information play in fostering trust with these prospective bidders? And how have you seen this affect the quality and competitiveness of the proposals you've received in the past?
I think as an owner, what you end up with is a low bid, lowest responsible bidder. And Chris, you brought up something that's very, very important. I think in our case, when I was at Contra Costa, I had a meeting with our contractors. We were going to get ready to advertise our AAA. We advertise award administer construction on the state highway system on this project. And I said, we're going to pay our contractors in 5 working days or less. And as I walked out, my CFO said, we can't do that. I said, why not? He goes, well, we're not set up to do that. I said, really? So let's not pay our employees instead of the 1st and the 15th of the month. Let's pay the employees on the 5th and the 20th of the month. He goes, we can't do that. I said, why not? He said, because their budgeting, their budgets are based on getting paid on the 1st and on the 15th. And I says, contractors are no different. Consultants are no different. And you got to worry about the prime. Primes are typically self-sufficient, but it's the subcontractors that you got to worry about. You know, they're taking a prime plus 2%. A loan out or whatever to keep their businesses afloat. And I want to pay them quickly so that the next contract they're going to bid lower, because as you guys know, they bid items. Everybody's going to bid on the same bid items, and they add profit and risk. If you've got a very difficult owner, you may think you're doing a great job, and you might be, and that's great. But what happens is the bids raise up because you add risk into those bids. And I think that contractors want to know that when they go into a project and when they bid that project, the owner has done everything they can to help mitigate that risk. They've got the right people on the job. They've done their due diligence as far as right-of-way. They're not going to come in. They don't have a right-of-way construction easement to do soil nailing because we forgot. And then now we've got to delay the contractor because we don't have the agreements in place to soil nail under somebody's house or under somebody's property. So those things, I think, all weigh in on the overall scheme of things. When contractors place bids, they may go just as simple as, yeah, that's a good owner, or no, that's not a good owner. Or they might say, you know, let's bid a little less risk in this because we really want to work for this owner. And that's the environment that when I was on the public sector side, I tried to create the best environment for everybody. And I think that we spent some time and didn't always get it right on utilities, but we didn't have, as I mentioned early on, we didn't have 4M in those days. Otherwise, that would have been a great tool for us to try out to make sure that it helps, again, mitigate risk, lower that risk, and we get better bids.
Yeah. If you could go back in time and you had a solution like 4M, it probably would have been nice when you were putting out some of these projects. I'm sure you have a ton of stories with just utility risk on the projects that you were leading and how they kind of derailed your projects because you weren't aware of those utilities. And it wasn't because, I'm assuming, you didn't have do the due diligence. There's only so much you can do sometimes when you don't have the proper tools to locate these utilities before these projects go into bid.
Yeah, we had so when you do find that you have utilities there, sometimes it changes your design. So like on bridges, so your foundation type could change based on the fact that you've got these pipes that are going to be so costly to move that you identified early on. And then the designers come in and say, we're going to have to put instead of this type of foundation, we're going to have to put in a cast and drill hole pile that's 13 foot in diameter, hold that bridge up, the high viaduct. And so then you got to worry, there's only a few contractors that actually have a drill that big to put that CIDH pile in place. And so we had a situation like that, but we caught it early. And so we had a workaround from the utilities. But if we didn't know the utilities were there and we went with a traditional foundation, we would have had to put a change order in place, and then all the work stops. And if it's on the critical path, now the owner starts paying delay, TRO, time-related overhead, things like that. And then everybody's not in a good mood.
Right.
And then when people aren't in a good mood, people are angry, then they may not take as much time to be as safe on a project as they should. And then that's where accidents happen. We try to create a work environment that help our contractors do the job right and make sure the employees went home safely every evening, and our consultants that did the construction management as well. And God forbid, because you spend 2 years or 3, whatever the length of the project is, you can have a great time building something and people remember that project forever. You can have a bad time building that project and everybody remembers that forever. So which story you want to be told about your time as an owner? The good times or the bad times?
I'm sure all it takes is one incident too. You can have all this great work, and you have one incident that happens on the job. It can kind of everybody's focus just goes to that. I can imagine.
Yeah, it's costly if you hit. So we had a situation when I was at Caltrans where our maintenance crews drove a road work ahead sign right into the ground on a mountain road and somewhere in District 10, and went right through a fiber optic cable that happened to carry cell phone service between Nevada and California. When we finally replaced that, I think we had to pay over $1 million in fines because of this disrupted cable. And I think ultimately it was the contractor's issue that placed the cable, but it's so rocky that you couldn't get that 3 foot of cover. And so it was up too high because of rock, they didn't want to blast out the rock alongside this conventional highway in the mountains. And I would think that is avoidable in the future. Just be prepared that there are things up there and make sure that you know where they are and take your due diligence so that you don't have those situations.
So you mentioned risk register at the beginning. Are these the types of items you had in the risk register? Hey, we are aware of a utility. We are aware of a communication fiber. And again, was it at a conceptual phase where that risk register was built so that bidding is right, or you get the proper sizing of the project and proper scoping of the project?
Yeah, you started during your design phase, building the risk register. So because you're gonna assemble all your items, bid items, your specifications, then you have to build a contingency. And so some agencies will pick 10, 15% out of the air and say that's our contingency. And what we try to do is build the contingency based on risk. And we first started this on the east span of the Bay Bridge, and we worked day and night to come up with that schedule. And I think it was in 2005. And we built the risk register. John Tapping was the guy that was kind of focused on that area. And we identified the risks and we try to mitigate those risks. And then we built a contingency for that project. And that contingency held as we built that, the east span of the Bay Bridge. I think ultimately it was about $6.7 billion.
Wow.
The contingency was about $900 million.
Amazing. And usual trend that we are seeing with many government agency or owners in general, the contingency that you talk about, it's more of a percentage of a project that is set aside. Maybe because there is less investigation of unknown unknowns, or they feel that there's more unknown. So what you're pointing out is that risk register is a better way to justify the contingency. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think for sure on major complex projects that you might want to start building a risk register and building your contingency based on what you see there. I think if you do a simple overlay of a conventional highway, 10, 15%, whatever your statistics, your analysis of all the data that comes in on what those projects ultimately end up costing, I think that probably is a good bet, a good number for you. When you get in those big massive bridge tunnel highway projects that are combined, widening freeways or building a new freeway, you might want to just figure out a little bit about your risk and then what those risks might cost. I think it helps you if we implemented also formal partnering in all of our construction projects. And so we met quarterly with our contractors and our design firms and our construction management firms. And if we needed, we brought PG&E in, for example, as a utility, because on several projects, we had to get them to move the utilities during construction because they say in these agreements that they have prior rights. But the agreements say that, when the owner comes in and tells you got to move, you got whatever number of days to move it. They typically say, oh, we're too busy. We don't have enough staff. And then we got to get this project advertised because we got to, let's say you have an environmental work window where you can't go in during certain times because you've got a burrowing owl or you've got a nesting seagull or whatever you got. Well, it's important that you coordinate all this. And then if you're doing precast, like precast girders, once you get in line, you don't want to get out of line, because if you get out of line, they only produce so many precast girders, and then you've got to step back in line and go back through that process. And now you're down the road 6, 8, 10 months. So all this stuff has to be coordinated, including the utility relocation is very, very critical. And the more complex the project, the more complex or more critical that utility relocation or utility coordination becomes.
Randy, I'd love to get your insight and perspective on what you first, to kind of step back a little bit, what you first thought of when you heard about 4M being a project owner, what this technology, like at first, were you kind of like skeptical of 4M? Like we're saying we can provide instant access to reliable utility data. Was this something that you were skeptical of? Were you excited about the thought of it? I'm just kind of curious to see like what your perspective was when you first heard about 4M and what the potential could be for something like this on projects moving forward and helping advance America's infrastructure.
I was optimistically excited about the potential of using big data and AI to pre-identify or identify utility locations in type. And that's when Len Patron actually called me and I said, well, I got to see this. To go back in time, Congress funded a Strategic Highway Research Program 2. It was the second phase. The first phase created a super pave, SHARP 1 or the SHARP program. SHARP 2, I was part of a team, this is a long time ago, selected about $450 million worth of research topics that could help project delivery in my case. And it could help congestion, it could help reliability of the system, and it could improve safety on our roadways and highways in America. And I ended up chairing the renewal committee for 2 terms. That was 6 years. And I think there's 37 or 38 projects. One was utility location, because it's always been an issue. And so I thought, wow, use big data. That's interesting. I never really thought about that. And so I asked about questions like, do you guys take the paint? Every time they're going to put utility they got something wrong with the main line, they come into your house and they paint all over your sidewalk, the different colors and locations and arrows and on the road and stuff. And they leave it there for you.
And I never knew what those were until I joined 4M, by the way. Now I'm like, it's a revelation. I'm like, that's what all those marks are.
Yeah. Yeah. And you still got to call USA, so to make sure that you know where the underground utilities are to do your due diligence. But wow, this is very fast. And when I saw it, first question, you got to ground truth what you see. You ground truth what you see but you can classify it. You got electricity, you've got water, you've got sewer. This is amazing. You got gas, high pressure gas lines and things like that. That's from a contractor's perspective. You don't want to hit those hazardous utility lines. You want to avoid that at all costs. And as an owner, I don't want anybody hurt or, God forbid, killed on one of our projects. And so I just thought, wow, if they can do that very quickly in the planning phase, then you can start really narrowing down what you want to pothole or what you want to bore to check. This is a great tool.
Yeah, I asked that because I feel like with any transformation of going from a traditional way of doing things to a digital transformation, if you will, there can be a lot of skepticism. And we've seen this in other industries. I know, I mentioned before an example of I was skeptical of online banking. There was a time when now I use my phone for everything. I'm using it as, checking in for my flights to ordering food to you name it. And I didn't think it was like safe or secure, but now it's just like I can't imagine my life without it. And so I think we're on the precipice here where, there is this transformation. And when people hear AI and, instant access to reliable utility data, because this has been the bane, utilities have been the bane of many people's existence existence in this industry for a long time. And to see something like this come along, I think, a lot of people want this. Like, why wouldn't somebody want this for the industry, right? Because this is only going to help us accelerate our infrastructure. And as I mentioned before, we do have a capacity challenge at, this skilled labor gap. And yet we have all this funding. So if there's anything that we can implement and utilize that can push our, infrastructure forward in a safer way, a more cost-efficient way, I think we at least owe it to at least every American here that we've done our due diligence and tried to implement new technologies. And so I think this is great. It's a learning for a lot of the industry, and it's exciting to see how this is developing. And I know Cowstoop's going to show us what we've been working on and what we got under the hood for the next, I guess, stage of 4M, which is really exciting as well. But it's just something that I think it's going to maybe take some time. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when we're going to continue to digitize things and just get more and more efficient. Cowstoop, do you want to walk us through some of the new things that we're cooking at 4M?
Absolutely. Let me start with the share. Let me get this out of the way. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, before jumping on to the actual demo, I want to just recap our product roadmap. It's a different view than what we presented back in our end of year seminar or webinar. But this view is the progression, the way we see it, and addressing a lot of the point that were discussed here earlier, right? Like the risk register. How can we start identifying risk early on in the project concept phase, or even project becomes a project, right? When you're exploring different options, how can we identify risk? And from a 4M's perspective, utility related risk, what are the tools that we could equip the decision makers, such as line planning or route planning? And how can we integrate with other systems, ArcGIS or CAD systems? And through this progression, we want to go to a Gen AI that's our ultimate Gen AI. That's our vision, where AI can start suggesting, AI can start highlighting, AI can start highlighting the risk, and AI can maybe recommend a risk register, right? That will be the ultimate goal, the ultimate vision of 4M. So we are starting with utility insights, and I'll show live in action how those utility insights are, what types of insights we are generating. But consider these insights as a foundational insights for all of the work that we will be doing in future. So without this insight generation capability, we won't be able to identify whether route A is better or route B is better, right? Or let the AI start identifying risk. So these insights are about not only just utility data, but the analytics on top of the utility data, or cross-examination of that utility data with other layers. So with that being said, let me quickly jump on to actual live demonstration. And there's an after party, as Chris mentioned. Nisa will walk many of you who want to explore this tool further. But let me quickly create a project. So I'm going to upload a KML. There are other ways to create this project. And I'm going to call this Redfield Expansions, Road Expansion. Let's call that Road Expansion. And this is our pursuit, right? Or we could be considering this as a bidding project. Once we click on utility map, this should pull the utilities that from our AI conflation engine. And if you want to know more about all these messages, like what is the enhancement, what are the on-surface object detection features, so on and so forth, stay on for the after party where Nisa will walk over that. But now what we have from 4M is instant access to utility data. And what we could do is click on these utility insights. This is a beta feature that we have launched. And I'll talk about what these insights are, and what it's doing is using our Gen AI. It is trying to summarize what's in the project, potential risk of what are the different things in the project. And what I'm demonstrating right now, it's a live demonstration. This feature is still in beta. It's still evolving. We are still working with our partners to get feedback from the industry. So this is not what it will get shipped as a final thing. But this is the evolution that I'm really excited to share with you guys. In this utility insights, the first question that we are trying to assess is the positioning of the utilities within the right of way and outside the right of way. So here are different utility types by their sectors. So if we can look at something like communication, on this project, the map that we have drawn, on that project, most of the communication is inside the estimated right-of-way, meaning any modifications you want to do, most probably you are dealing within the right-of-way. Some of it is outside the right-of-way. So I'll stop here before going on to the insights that we are generating below this. But a question to you, Randy, in terms of estimated right-of-way, having this sort of view early on in the project, having this sort of view at a concept stage or at a bidding stage, what is the impact that you can think of from an owner's perspective this data could have?
Well, we used to have separate contracts to move the utilities where we found them and before the contract actually started. But I can see there's a lot of uses for advanced information in the project delivery process. And I sound like a broken record, but I think it's all risk. And I think if you can mitigate risk earlier, it's going to be a lot cheaper, less expensive than it will be later on. So in the whole process, as you go further to the right and get closer to construction and you find things, it's going to cost a lot more than if you would have caught it early in the early phase. And so that's why I think that one of the areas is at Caltrans, at least in the early planning phases of a project, when you start building that budget, that's when it's most critical, I think, because once you get to construction, then it's the old adage, design just threw it over the fence and now we in construction have to take care of it. And that's really not an environment that you want. You want a team effort. So that one team, part of the team wins, the whole team wins. And one part of the team doesn't do so well, then we're gonna suck it up in construction. But that's where all these issues are caught.
Yeah. Fair point. What we have been also hearing from industry, and correct me if I'm wrong, depending on the locality, in some situations, if the utility is outside the right-of-way and you have to do any sorts of modification, let's say you are looking at a lane expansion project and a lot of utilities are not within the right-of-way, dealing with the coordination process, if you have to even move them further away, then the easement acquisition, all of that could take up to 18 or 24 months, whereas on the flip side, if the right-of-way is too congested and you want to do some modification within the right-of-way, then it is hard to expand that right-of-way further. That's what we heard from the industry. So this view, again, depending on your objective, could work. The right-of-way utilities inside the right-of-way could work for you or the other way around. So as we evolve this feature further, we will also ask that business context. What are your business objectives? And back to your point, once we capture those business objectives within 4M, then that will be our path to generate much more realistic risk register. So we understand the business context. We already have this analysis done with utility insights. We'll marry those two, and that will take us to the risk register. All right. The second analysis that we have done, or second insights that we are generating, is how the existing utilities are traversing through different parcels. For an example, if you're looking at existing electric lines, and let's say I'll take an undergrounding program as an example, how the existing utilities are going through different parcels. Again, with the existing utilities, yes, there will be some easement that's there, but then for you to conduct some sort of modification, you have to get permit to access to those particular parcels. It might fit into the current easement, or maybe you have to go with a new agreement with the owner of those parcels. This gives you kind of a high level idea of the complexity that you are looking at in terms of the parcel composition and how different utilities are within those parcels. And the last one that we have is about the intersections. So we are trying to categorize the intersections based on, is it like a risk for construction, meaning are there locations where electricity and gas, are they crossing? Are there locations where sewage line is crossing gas, so on and so forth? And again, I'm drawn to that undergrounding use case where if you have an electric lines above ground, you want to underground them, then these intersections come into play for your understanding of, okay, these are the locations. Even I want to take the lines below the ground. Here are the spots that I need to be careful about. And then let me quickly switch to a different view of this just to show this object detection. So it's the same project, but in this situation, the objects are already detected. Nisa will talk more about this, but we have on-surface object detection. Based on the satellite images, you could identify what objects are there. And if you go to the utility insights for a panel like this, you will have a list of all objects displayed over here. So that's a quick overview of utility insights. As I mentioned, this feature is in beta. We have been working with our partners. Some of the feedback that we have got from the partners is, okay, this is great, but we want more. The more that we will add to this feature is identify the lines more than 20-inch diameter, larger than 20-inch diameter present on this project, irrespective of the sectors. So if you have a water lines which are larger than 20-inch diameter, let us know. Oil transportation or transmission lines, so on and so forth. So we will be identifying those lines and putting that in a summary, because larger lines, based on our understanding and our partners' information sharing, it could be significant risk. Also identify a different parcels type, which are critical infrastructure. For an example, fire station or police station. If there are schools within the project that I'm planning for, if there are hospitals, if there is a cemetery within the project bounds, then we are going to flag that. And from the intersection perspective, we will work a little bit more to fine tune the intersections based on the business perspective. So this AI generated summary, it will be much more evolved, much more crisp, and it will resonate even further than what I'm showing you on the screen. So this feature, and we will also add a couple more things. For an example, in upcoming week, you will be not only able to see the dashboard, but you will also have an interactive map, meaning you can click on the right of way and only filter the lines which are within the right of way, or same with the parcel information. You can start color coding the parcels, or same with the intersections. You can pinpoint, okay, I'm interested in electricity versus gas as an intersection. Show me only those locations. We will be able to do that on an interactive map. So that's where Utility Insights is heading. Again, our vision with Utility Insights is try to identify those risks on the project. These are 3 questions that we are analyzing for now. But if you have more ideas, for an example, some of the ideas that we already received from our partners is, hey, show us existing utilities within the flood zone. We would like to know that. Or show us if there is a transition in jurisdiction between the project bounds that I've drawn, or show us wetlands within this project bounds that I've drawn. So if you have more suggestions like those, send us our way. We'll be happy to incorporate that in our product. But the goal with this Utility Insights to drive 4M toward that risk register, to tell you more in the pursuit phase or in the bidding phase, what are the potential risks on this project. That is the value proposition we would love to deliver to you. And if you're interested in working with us, as I said, we're still in beta phase. Your feedback is more than welcome. So together we can evolve this feature to much higher level. All right.
It almost sounds like a co-pilot, or as I see here, like the 4M agent. It's almost like this is like an extension, or it can be an extension of, your company. It's like this is, however you want to call it, like this co-pilot that's like side by side with you, giving you, helping you out with your project. I had a question for you. Is this proprietary data? I mean, you mentioned like Gen AI. People are probably familiar with like ChatGPT, Gemini. There's all these other, AI, ChatGPT kind of agents out there. Is this proprietary to 4M? Like, how does that work?
So we are working with technology partners, right? So a lot of the LLM is built with our technology partners. That's the answer. So it is based on some of the industry standards that are out there, and we are working with them to create a 4M flavor of some of the LLMs that are out there.
But we're using our foundation data that's proprietary to 4M. You can't just go to ChatGPT or something and get this.
No. Yeah, the key to generating any of these insights is the data, right? So the data behind it, which is generated by our conflation engine. Without that, Utility Insights means nothing, right? So you cannot go to ChatGPT and ask a question about this locality, you will get nothing. So and that's a great question, Chris. How it's generated, the secret behind the sauce is our data, right? Because we have that data, we can now feed that data. We can analyze that data in different ways, like right of way or parcel or intersection. And then the summarization of this analysis is provided to an LLM. There is more context provided to the LLM, and then LLM can then marry the context with the summary, the number crunching that we have already done, and then presents that data in a much more consumable format. But by no means we are relying on LLM for number crunching. That all happens before we share these things with LLM. I hope that answers or clarifies your question. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just thinking what other people might be thinking in their heads too. And it's obvious you're doing this in real time. That speed is the value here too. Like how quickly this information and these insights are generated, which is pretty incredible to see.
Yeah, it's almost real time. And I don't want to allude too much to product vision, but back to that slide I was sharing, right? 4M agent is on our roadmap. So this is kind of nascent phases of this agent where it's not interactive, it's just summarizing things. But you can already extrapolate that to a future where, as you were saying, Chris, once the data is there, it's much more, putting an interactive agent on top of it is much more valuable.
We had a question come in from the audience, Casto. I think this would be a great one for you to take. What tools can you use to stake out and verify the locations of the utilities?
Great question. There are a couple of things I can share right now. So one of the amazing tools that we have is our on-surface feature, right? So you could click on any of the on-surface feature that we have detected, and then you could start validating the actual evidence on surface for many of the utilities. Now, again, is that this type of evidence might not be enough for all utilities. And in Q2, somewhere either mid or towards end of Q2, we will have additional feature where when you click on a line, there will be more context on how our AI conflation engine has arrived on presence of this line. So we will be sharing more information. Right now, like Nisa will go over that, but in general, how we gather this data is by conflating millions of data points together. So we are processing GIS layers, we are processing publicly available PDFs, permits, all sorts of other information that is in public domain. We conflate that data together, and literally we kind of retouch or reproduce every single line that you see on the map over here. So these are 4M generated lines. And now going in Q2, we will also start to add new lines. What I mean by that is, let's say we find some on-surface evidence that water hydrants are there, but the line is not indicated in any public record. We will be adding those lines. But back to the question from the audience, these lines are generated by conflation of millions of records together. And also one of the verification method you can use is on-surface objects, as I've shown you. Again, the intent of our data is to be used in the concept, in the early planning phase, in the bidding phase. We are not stamping our data, right? So by no means we are replacing any CU practices or any surveying practices that exist out there. We are here to help you to plan better, to understand the risk better early on in the project.
Yeah, that's great. And I think double tapping on the speed there. And I think that's a common misconception about, we're not stamping anything, to your point, Castu. It's just that the value really is just the speed to data that we're offering, especially early on in the construction lifecycle, as everybody knows, is the earliest cost point there. We're at just about the top of the hour here. And I know, Castu, you were itching to start that after party before the after party started. But as you mentioned, Nisa is going to be digging into more of the full capabilities, features, and workflows of 4M. Please stay on if you have an extra, 10 minutes. I know you guys are all busy. You probably have some placeholders on your calendar already, but if you can stay on, Nisa would love to show you the full capabilities that 4M has to offer. But before we do that, I just really wanted to thank everybody for being here today, being a part of this conversation. First and foremost, to the experts, Castu, Randy, thank you so much for being here. Apologies again for Stroud not being able to show up today, who is sick. We wish you well, Stroud, and hope you're feeling better. My friend and colleague Nisa is going to take the baton now.
Perfect. Well, welcome to the after party. For those that are willing to stay, appreciate it. And now I'll dive into the fun part of it. I'll say that because they called it after party, so I'm allowed to. But here we'll hop into 4M. So we are a web-based platform. So you'll have the ability to answer, Dale, your question that you popped in. Not sure if you're still on. What I'll show you today is available in 9 states currently. So we're going to hop into Texas first, where you'll have the ability to either zoom into an area, type an address, come in here, you'll see your projects on the left-hand side. And as far as creating a project, When you're zoomed in close enough, we'll show the approximate right-of-ways. You can toggle that on and off. And then you have the ability to freehand a polygon, upload a KMZ shapefile, or draw a linear project and set a buffer. So to give us a little bit more real estate, I'm based here in Austin, and we have I-35, which is always a topic that we're talking through. So I'll draw an area around that. You'll have the ability to name your project and then hit See Utility Map. What we're going to do is instantly reveal the utility information within that project boundary. If you click into this project now, we'll show some base level analytics, as well as break down the utility sectors and reveal the utility owners within that project boundary. You do have the ability to export that list, as well as slice and dice the data how you see fit. If I only wanted to look at a particular sector or even a particular owner, you have the ability to do that, or even see above ground versus below ground. If you click into any individual line, you'll have the ability to see that information, as well as any key attributes that we may have within that line. As you can see, some of them have additional information. You also have the ability to download this into GIS. As you can see, all this information here. The last thing I will show here is what Calstube alluded to. We also have our AI-powered object detection. We're in a 2-hour turnaround time. You'll be able to see the manholes and utility poles in that project as well. So you'll start this detection process. And I know we are already in the after party, so I'm sure y'all don't want to wait 2 hours for that to show up. So I do have a project also along I-35 just in Round Rock, Texas, where you'll come in here, you'll see the objects broken down, and then have the ability to click in if you're close enough to those icons, and then jump into that street view. So you can see this is what we populated through that AI-powered object detection. There are a number of on-surface features that are on the roadmap to also be included within this, but currently we have utility poles and manholes. So that is a very quick demonstration. Chris, I'm not sure if there's anything additional that you want, but appreciate everyone hopping in. Before we do break, we do have an offer to share. So if anyone does want free utility information for your next pursuit, we will provide a custom demo within your specific area, as well as an export of the data. And I believe that is the link that Lisa just shared with everyone.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Nisa. Thank you for the after party. Next time, we'll have to bring a drink with us or something. It doesn't feel like quite the after party without something in my hand. But that was awesome. And to echo Nisa, Lisa just dropped a link in the chat, 4manalytics.com/pursuit. As Nisa mentioned, we will help you out with your next pursuit. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. What do you have to lose? Click on the link, see what we can do to help you out, help you win your next pursuit.